Chapter 394, The Time He Waited, the Time He Walked, 7. His master was not a perfect person. That's not how you do it. Watch closely. There was always a slight thrill mixed into those words. You're doing well. Quite impressive. There was always a slight jealousy mixed into those words. At this part, there's nothing more I can teach. You're better than me now. There was always a slight frustration mixed into those words. The reason he could feel these emotions was not solely because he was particularly perceptive. It was because his master did not try to hide them. When he first became a disciple, his master clearly said, "I will treat you as you are. I won't embellish. I won't hide. I won't deceive. You will always see my true face. The me you see will exactly match the depths of my being." His master looked him straight in the eyes. Therefore, you must become strong. There are those who wield honesty like a get-out-of-jail-free card. What they forget is that any person's heart is sharp enough to slice through someone else's heart. Just as there is no courtesy in carrying a naked blade without a scabbard, treating someone with absolute honesty can never be a heartwarming tale. His master firmly held his shoulders and continued in a resolute tone. Nevertheless, I will be honest with you. Your heart will be cut countless times by me. Be prepared. Do you understand? He nodded. It was just as his master said. Raw, unfiltered honesty was truly a terrifying thing. Even when people from the Great Yin Grotto clung to him, even when enemies pointed their swords at him, they were never completely honest, which he learned through real battles. His master taught him how to deal with this knowledge. Do not try to be considerate where it is impossible. Cut through it. Do not avoid, face it. Do not accept what you cannot accept. Strike back. Face me with the mindset of wielding a blade in a duel. Endure. Confront. Become stronger. And so he did. He did not avoid getting hurt. He did not awkwardly try to match the mood. He simply treated the person called master as he was, and his master treated him the same. Just as there can be no gaps between mountains and fields, there were no misunderstandings between them. Thus, it's about time for you to leave. He could not misunderstand the meaning of those words. Master. I have lasted long enough. His master was dying. The true human are a race that absorbs sunlight through their skin and sustains themselves by sucking sap through their mouths. Their physical size does not change much from birth to death, but the brightness of their skin could roughly indicate their age. His master, already quite dim when they first met, was now like a candle wick that had burned down to nothing but the last flicker before going out. I was not strong enough to live forever. That's all there is to it. His master coughed. His body flashed brightly once and then dimmed. He learned that not being able to misunderstand was both a terrifying and sorrowful thing. I'm glad. And it was also painfully joyous. That I could meet you before I left. Those words were filled with deep regret and profound gratitude. That I could teach you various things. Those words were filled with intense sorrow and great relief. It was a fortune to have been your master. Those words were filled with bottomless anxiety and soaring pride. Master. His master could have said this too. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was lacking. Please forgive my weakness for not consistently leading the way before you, and ultimately not being able to stand beside you. But instead of doing so, his master said this. He expressed gratitude for their meeting rather than apologizing for his shortcomings. And it wasn't a lie. It wasn't made up. Although both were exactly the same proportion, and neither choice would be false, his master still chose to do so. He knew this without deceit. Thump! He prostrated himself on the floor with his forehead. Thump! His master, lying in the sickbed, watched him with faint flickers. Thump! 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 It was a bow offered to his master. His master silently received his bow. The gratitude in one bow, the regret in another, and once more, a bow. If it said that each piece of the sky shattered by the original sword strike has a soul lingering in it, then the bows he offered were surely drawing down each of those souls to the earth in reverence. There were 17 bows in total. His master smiled. Since his master's face lacked eyes and a nose, a smile could be formed just by moving the lips. Thank you. His master closed his eyes. It did not take long for the flickering to cease, and only a milky white body remained. By the time that time had passed, he no longer had a master. Living in a world without his master was not as overwhelming as it might seem. His master had taught him. There were problems in the world that existed regardless of the strength one possessed. Even a single person's heart could be sharp enough to wound him. The fact that one must face each encounter as if crossing swords taught him just how full of adversaries this world was. He could have killed all the people in this world alone, but conversely, he couldn't save even one dying person. He was not invincible. He was just a bit lucky. He was just a bit naturally strong. That was all. He was an ordinary person. And so, in that moment, he realized that he was no longer lonely. 7. The declaration of clearing the floor was made as soon as he entered. Key formation complete. The world fragments woven by your world are now completely bound to your world. The worlds that had been destroyed have gained another opportunity in the lion world. The 97th floor is cleared. However, the one who heard this declaration did not step onto the staircase leading to the next floor. Instead, he quietly walked through the world. No, through worlds. At one time, cruel things happened here. This world was a museum. The walls were spotlessly white. Similarly, the whitish ceiling and floor were connected by shimmering silver ducts. It had a hospital-like atmosphere. However, what was placed there were not specimens or sickbeds, but various statues, paintings, and tools. The motifs of the statues varied but mostly shared the commonality of depicting young children. The contents of the paintings involved the use of tools on these young children. And the tools were all instruments of torture. Tools for pulling out live teeth, tools for prying open the gaps of fingernails, tools from which steam would pour out when water was added and fire was applied, tools that would rip the scalp along with the hair when pulled, all were tools capable of inflicting pain. A woman in a gown led a group of boys and girls freshly dressed in school uniforms and said, "When the evangelist of everlasting happiness, constellation governed here, victims were chosen. And the screams of those victims were used as power to produce food, operate machines, and make medicine." The boys and girls listened intently to the woman's story, holding their breath. Is it justifiable to sacrifice a few for the many? If it is, then is it right to sacrifice one person for the sake of everyone? Between a death given in an instant and prolonged pain that staves off death, which is truly more unjust? Many people could give a variety of answers. Some might think that what happened here represents our inevitable future, and all human effort is either a struggle to ignore it or futile efforts to delay it. As the woman looked each of the boys and girls in the eye, she continued speaking. It's okay to think that way. No, it would even be fine if some of you regard it as an ideal and strive towards it. The woman raised her head and looked around at the paintings hanging in the museum. Because the tragedy of this world is not that it is such a world, but that everyone has become so accustomed to such a world that no one even questions it anymore. The woman stopped in front of a statue. The statue's subject was not a young child. The woman stroked the back of her hand over a statue of a man standing with a sword. Action without question becomes a matter of course, and there is no responsibility in what is considered a matter of course. And in a world where no one takes responsibility, there are no further possibilities, and where there are no possibilities, there is no future. That's why this world remained destroyed until someone from outside came along. Few of the students understood her story. Many were more interested in the provocative contents of the pictures. One person chuckled lightly while looking up at the man's statue. Another child poked at the torture tools with a finger, feeling the texture of the metal. However, a few, really, just a few, were deep in thought. Everyone. The woman addressed that minority. It's okay, whatever kind of life you lead. Just be someone who takes responsibility for your own life. The students answered with a yes. The statue of the man seemed to be looking down at those students. The man resembling the statue also observed the scene. No one could sense his presence as he slowly began to walk. I'm telling you, there's no news. The next place the man stepped into was a splendid palace. A blonde girl with a garden trowel at her side was frowning and ranting. Damn it! I just want to know when that damn guy will return. Whether he's really dead or not, at least that's not the case, right? In front of the blonde girl was a woman with long silver hair tied back. She sighed while folding her fan and replied, That's right. Considering my skill hasn't activated, he's not dead. Are you sure about that? What about that, the previous incident with Constellation Killer? What if he's been sealed or something? Then he would have asked for help. Maybe he didn't even have a chance to ask for help before he died. That's unlikely. The silver-haired woman crossed her legs and rested her chin on her hand. Anyway, he is my partner, after all. The blonde girl sighed, her head drooping. Crazy inseparable couple. What did you just say? I said, a crazy inseparable couple? The silver-haired woman stared blankly at the blonde girl. The blonde girl looked back at the woman with a what, why expression, and after about a minute passed, she cleared her throat and then tucked her hands into her robe. Anyway, this. Changing the subject, I see. Just take this, here. The silver-haired woman accepted the object the girl handed her. Inside it was a well-dried fish. The silver-haired woman's delicate face grimaced. What's this? Dried pollock. Why dried pollock? The crown prince asked me to bring it to you. Said he was sorry about this and that. That man, seriously. The silver-haired woman touched her forehead. It was at that moment. The silver-haired woman paused and turned her head. The blonde girl was startled and looked in the same direction before furrowing one eyebrow. There's nothing there, right? What's the matter? Did you see a ghost or something? The silver-haired woman just smiled slightly, without answering. The blonde girl seemed to shiver at her expression, but regardless, the silver-haired woman reached out and accepted the gift. Tell him I received it well. The blonde girl's eyes widened. Huh? I thought you'd just toss it to the dogs. Maybe you've mellowed over time? No. The silver-haired woman pushed the gift aside and propped her chin again. I had this feeling somewhere that he was getting jealous. Isn't that just cute? You crazy cringy couple. I'm out. After the blonde girl left, lamenting, the silver-haired woman continued to smile at a corner of her room for a while. The man started walking again. His journey continued. As for me, the cosmic Iron Knight, In a place with no stars. He walked through a world made only of points and lines, composed of countless satellites and massive connecting pathways. There's a terrifying legend at Dawn Mountain Cabin. What legend? I don't believe in legends. What the hell is up with this crazy old man? On a dark mountain peak stood a cabin. He walked through a world that was merely that. Mom. Mom. Look at this. Yes, my daughter. It's called dried pollock. Where did you get it?
Oh.
Mr. Dried Pollock Jussie gave it to me. He walked through a world where a free-spirited girl was holding the hand of a sickly-looking woman and crossing a crosswalk. In that world, the woman and man exchanged glances for a moment. Maybe the woman's daughter, the girl, as well. It could just be a coincidence, or they might have really made eye contact. The man himself didn't know. In fact, as a man, he could not even be sure if he and the silver-haired woman had truly had any contact in the previous world, or if that, too, was merely an incredible coincidence. But he knew he would soon find out. Very soon. The place where the man, who had traversed many worlds, finally stopped was in front of a red peony flower blooming in spring. Beyond that peony, a sword was embedded. There was nothing else. No tombstone as tall as a tower, no burial mound as large as a mountain. It seemed to be maintained since the blade was not rusted, but otherwise, with the lush weeds and wildflowers, it just looked like a flower garden. But it was not just any flower garden. It was simply that the sword, and that peony, were part of the flora along with the weeds and wildflowers. The man began to bow towards the flowers. With the first bow, the man encompassed the death and rebirth of a world that had sought immortal happiness through the pain of an innocent child. With the second bow, the man encompassed the death and rebirth of a world where a heart of silver stuck in eternity, died of duty and lived again through love transcending duty. With the third bow, another world. With the fourth bow, the fifth, the sixth. Eventually, at the last ninth bow, the man encapsulated the peony that bloomed at the end of an eternal winter. The man bowed deeply. And then he stepped back, turning around to walk away just as the peony went out of view. Entering the 98th floor. Chapter 395, The Time He Waited, The Time He Walked, 8. 7. After his master died, he wandered the world for a while. He was unrivaled. He walked alone. However, people lined up to block his path and queued up to follow him. Stop, you evil rotten demon! How dare you claim to be a disciple of the Sun Sage and impersonate the righteous faction? My son, the primordial sword. When will you return to us? You are a strong one. I pay my respects. My lord. I am one called Myo Husong, and I wish to hold a lantern for you on your path. There were those who wielded weapons, those who clutched at his sleeves, those who requested a handshake, and those who bowed, but they all shared the common trait of surrounding him. The people he met added depth to the footprints he left, heavy enough to make a difference. Thus, wherever he passed, a grand road formed. It was the Great Path. Sword Demon. Sword Dragon. Sword King. Sword Heaven. Sword Lord. All the numerous titles used to address him merged into one on the Grand Road. Sword Emperor. That was his new name. Everyone tried to block him, yet no one could follow him, yet everyone did. He was with no one, yet he was with everyone. The Sword Emperor streaked across the world of myriad swords like a comet. However, this period was named the fifth sword strike in the world of myriad swords not just because the Sword Emperor's progress was etched like sword marks. It was also because it had appeared during this period. People whispered amongst themselves. What is that? It was a massive tower. But the tower was too large to simply dismiss. It was high. It was also thick. Those who had lived in cities wouldn't dare to consider it a mere tower, for it was larger than the largest city they knew. Those who had climbed mountains would see it as taller than any mountain ridge they had climbed. Those who had been to the sea would see it sprouting from beyond the entire horizon, and they too wouldn't dare to call it a mere tower. It's like a handle of a sword thrust by a giant to split this world. People whispered amongst themselves like that. The whispering spread with words like these. Who built it? What lives in there? What being resides at the top? And it continued with words like these. Why is it visible no matter where you go? Indeed, the tower was visible everywhere. It was a curious phenomenon. It was impossible for something to be in two places at once. Yet the tower was always there, no matter where one turned their head. Beyond the city, beyond the mountains, beyond the sea, beyond the road, casting its base like an unerasable backdrop at the edge of one's vision. Is it too big? Some theorized, arguing that because the world is round, one eventually returns to where they started if they keep walking. Is it a mirage? Some, who found it strange that no matter how much they approached, they couldn't get closer, and no matter how much they fled, they couldn't get further away, hypothesized this. No. The Sword Emperor provided a clear answer amid the bustling debate. It's following us. People couldn't immediately understand what the Sword Emperor meant. The tower was following them? Did that mean the tower was alive? The Sword Emperor firmly said so. It's waiting. It's waiting. Yes. Can't you feel this, waiting? People looked at each other. Anger is easy to feel. Love, contempt too can be easily sensed. But to feel waiting was a somewhat unfamiliar notion. However, the Sword Emperor naturally uttered that unfamiliar phrase. Even the words he spoke afterward surprised the gathered people even more. I guess I should go have a drink or something. Chuckle, the Sword Emperor stood up from his spot and stretched comfortably. He said, I'll be back in a moment. Excuse me? Where to? Up there. His tone suggested he was just stopping by a nearby tavern before returning. His too calm demeanor made it impossible for people to comprehend the meaning of his words. Those who want to follow, follow. And the Sword Emperor gave them no chance to understand. I'll be waiting. That day, a sword forged by the people entered the blade stuck in the world of myriad swords. It had happened more than 150 years ago. 8. After paying respects at my master's memorial, I entered the 98th floor. Entering the 98th floor. As soon as I set foot there, I was seized by a strange sensation. A familiar feeling. The sensation of looking at something familiar. This is the Ejim Empire. The very world where I met Shiny and fought with Estelle. I was standing in the silent imperial audience chamber. It's been a while since I've been here. I murmured to myself. Behu Ryung, floating buoyantly beside me, crossed his arms and chuckled. You'll meet someone you haven't seen in a while. Someone I haven't seen in a while. Do you remember what your house's advisor used to say? Huh? Estelle? Yes. Before she became your house's advisor. Wait a minute. It's been a while. Oh. Perhaps the one where said she would send me to the 99th floor. Indeed. As I made a face of understanding, a familiar sound came, coinciding with it. It was raindrops. Plunk, 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 plunk. Plunk. Rain. Abandoned droplets from the sky hit the audience chamber windows. A blurry trail slowly spread and was soon washed away by a new stream of falling water. In a world that had stopped, only the rainwater flowed. Then, a voice came. Family head? I looked up. Estelle was walking towards me from a distance. The face I hadn't seen in so long made an expression as if she had seen a ghost. Family head, is it really you, family head? I raised a hand with a pleased expression. Yes, advisor. It's been a very long time. The next moment, a terrible impact struck me.
Ugh.
Like a fly swatted by a fly swatter, I was slammed to the floor. Once more, a waterfall-like strike of aura hit me. I almost perished. Wait, why suddenly?
Ugh.
Why do you think that is? Probably because it's been a very long time. No. Wait a minute. How can you see me, kook? Because I am the examiner of the 98th floor. Being the examiner of the 98th floor means, the pillar or whatever came and explained. That soon, family head, you will come, so prepare. Being able to make contact with me is also, eek. Yes. Seriously, what on earth, what is this, really? I shut my mouth. It was a rapid-fire explanation that made perfect sense. Even the beating was a bonus to the situation. Every question I threw seemed to add a shock that felt like my body would shatter, indeed making me cautious about speaking. Estelle struggled to suppress her emotions for a while, then once again lifted her large sword wrapped in red aura. Anyway, take some more hits. No. Does getting hit continue regardless if I keep my mouth shut? Wait a moment, advisor. To replace that joyful feeling of meeting again after a long time with violence is, Gaiak. For a long time, the beating continued. It was only when the sound of the pouring rain and the ringing in my ears from the impacts became indistinguishable that Estelle's sword finally stopped. It wasn't by Estelle's will. That's enough, advisor. It was Shiny's voice. I lifted my head. In my blurry vision, I caught sight of Shiny descending step by step. Estelle clicked her tongue. Shiny. Yes. I understand your feelings, but still. So she understands, huh? I wish you wouldn't understand, just as I was thinking that when Shiny added a comment. Estelle SSI, your current appearance is just like a girl from the novel genre that Venomous Snake SSI enjoys reading.
Ah.
Estelle screamed. Shiny extended a wing and gently patted her head, then turned to look at me. I said. Hello, Shiny. You are. I'm also an examiner of this 98th floor. Ah. Indeed. Together with Estelle. I was also in charge of managing the 11th to 20th floors. The reason you are interrupting me now is. Do you want to ask? No. I dropped my shoulders. Both Shiny and Estelle, who had just barely managed to rebuild their shattered selves, glared at me with icy eyes. The first to speak was Shiny. Please come back soon. I couldn't make excuses in the face of those words mixed with a sigh. After all, I had been walking among people without revealing myself for a long time. I'm sorry. I genuinely had no choice but to bow my head deeply. I'll return soon. Yes. Shiny spread all 5 pairs of wings. The goddess of the protection stretch scattered a fluffy scent around, like a blanket dried in the morning sun. The advisor and I will help you to be able to do that. Shortly after, a message window opened. The goddess of protection offers you a reward. The devil king of fall rain offers you a reward. Please choose between the 2 rewards. I blinked unknowingly. It couldn't be helped. It had been a very long time since I'd seen such messages. You guys. As if anticipating my reaction, a selection window smoothly popped up. Plus. The goddess of protection. Description: the goddess protecting the Egyptian Empire was moved by your devotion. The goddess has proposed the honor of being able to serve her a meal. Plus. Wait a minute. This means I have to serve the meal, right? Not that she will serve it to me? And she's expressing that as an honor now? Plus. You could serve fried egg soy sauce rice, a full Sormwen-style banquet, or even fry some chicken. Whatever you choose, your cooking will undergo a strict evaluation, and scores will be assigned. Plus. What? Plus. Hero of the goddess. Please return soon. And please give Sylvia a good beating. However, if you choose the reward of the Devil King, why can't you choose the goddess's reward? Plus. No. That last part is just weird. With the quest message, Shiny you. Baffled, I looked at Shiny, but was even more perplexed by the new message that suddenly appeared. Plus. The Devil King of Autumn Rain. Description: the Devil King admires your achievements. The Devil King proposes to secretly collaborate with you. She promises the exact same rewards as the goddess, but with an additional gift. Quickly finish 99 recommended novels by Estelle and come back to leave a review of at least 1,200 characters. If you promise to do so, the Devil King will use his power to transport you directly to the 99th floor. However, only one person can receive the Devil King's reward. Though it's just you anyway. If multiple people choose this reward, only one will be randomly selected. Though that won't happen. If no one chooses, the Devil King's reward will be automatically selected. Plus. Estelle, you too. Hey, you guys. I muttered with a baffled face and then laughed looking at their faces. I couldn't help but laugh. Really, you guys. Long ago. There was a Devil King who became the incarnation of vengeance after everything it had was burnt to ashes. There was a goddess who could only watch as everything she had achieved was submerged in a flood due to that Devil King. Estelle. The Devil King wanted those who plunged it and its precious ones into misery, and all those who watched it happen by being alive, to fall into hell. He simply wished for those who had plunged him and his beloved beings into misery, and all who had witnessed it by merely living, to fall into hell. Shiny. The goddess tried to prevent it by any means. Like scooping out water from an overflowing dam with hands. Desperately asking for our help, hoping to give their already destroyed world just one more chance, to ensure we don't fall for the Devil King's schemes. You guys. Thus, they confronted each other, aiming for each other's throats with each letter that appeared in the quest window. They tempted, begged, mocked, and lamented, hoping that I, would choose themselves and not the other. There was such a time. And those two were now speaking to me through that very quest window. Please come back soon, they say. We'll be waiting, they say. It was. I felt that it was a very beautiful thing. Yes. I felt again what I had felt from the 91st floor to the 97th floor. The experiences I had while climbing the tower were not meaningless. I'll be back. Key formation complete. I said, wiping the corner of my eye. I barely managed to speak. Estelle and Shiny looked at each other and smiled slightly. The administrators of the 98th floor, the managers of the other world you first encountered allow your passage. Yes. Please come back. The 98th floor is cleared. That's how they let me go. Entering the 99th floor. As soon as the sandstorm settled, what overwhelmed me was a scent that was almost violent in its intensity. The scent of the flowers in my sanctuary, the garden of withered flowers, is like the curtains on a rainy day, drooping. The fragrance of those weary of life is subtly spread and seeps through without overwhelming. But what filled this place was a completely different scent, one full of vitality. The scent of those who live unreservedly. The fragrance of those who enjoy life without reservation. Phew. I steadied my swaying forehead with my hand. And just then, I noticed another anomaly. There was a distinct texture in my palm. I could feel breathing. I could feel temperature. Indeed. I clenched and then unclenched my fist. I closed my eyes once and then opened them. A feast of natural colors as dazzling as the fragrance unfolded before my eyes. Among the living things, I too was alive. And there, I saw him. Sitting cross-legged atop an overflowing flower garden, he must have been there for a very long time. Weathered alive through the ever-changing seasons, he was like a moss-covered statue beyond the grass, flowers, and trees that had taken his place. The wind blew. He was so still that initially, it seemed only the hem of his robe fluttered. Captivated by the fluttering, it took me a moment to realize that he had extended his arm to the side. His large hand grasped the hilt of a colossal sword buried beneath the flower bed. From his shoulder down his arm to his hand, it writhed like a separate living creature. The sword was drawn. It was a vigorous movement, like a dragon rising. No flowers were crushed. No blades of grass were broken. It was just the flower bed undulating fiercely, like the surface of a lake. He rose, his feet wet from the flower bed. He turned around. The sunlight that stretched out broke into light and shadow across his angular muscles. The shattered pieces of sunlight sparkled around the edges of the flower petals like marbles. The shadow that had heavily fallen was absorbed and disappeared by the shadows of the grass that lay on the ground. In the clear sky, clouds as large as mountains drifted. In this vertically narrow world, he appeared as a mountain range standing alone. The wind blew. Dandelion seeds scattered with a whoosh. Come quickly. Under the azure sky, the Sword Emperor smiled. You're late, you zombie bastard. Chapter 396, Your World and Mine, 1. I expected as much. I began the conversation like that. You have already, several times, talked mysteriously about the 99th floor. Let me correct myself. I was about to start with that. Shut up, you zombie. Eat this first. The clouds floating in the sky split into two. The sky then split next. Following the straight line of the split sky, a crack formed in the void. The straight line led towards me and rapidly thickened. I exclaimed. Oh! Shh! The moment I raised my dagger, a loud boom resounded. Bang! The aura infused in the dagger flickered out like a fire hit by sand. I desperately tried to inject more aura through the handle, but soon realized I was engaging in folly. Arg! It was like trying to hold up a shield against an incoming tsunami. One might call such a person a Don Quixote rather than a hero. From the perspective of someone who was once called a hero, at least achieving some meaningful result is the bare minimum. Eek! If so. Stop, just stop. I groaned as I sidestepped with the dagger in my hand. As the angle of entry shifted, the strike from the Sword Emperor also became somewhat disrupted. As massive as it was, letting it pass was no use in stopping it, but at least it gave me a moment to breathe, and frankly, that was enough. I shouted. Do it! The ground swayed and shook. The roots spread beneath it, the grass that grew on it, sunflowers, anemones, lilies, marsh marigolds, hepaticas, starflowers, touch-me-nots, sneezeweeds, and morning glories all shook together, Pollen scattered. Vitality and the will to live overflowed. On this trembling ground, however, I was unshaken. Firmly, I stood there. What I envisioned was not a pillar but a great tree. A world tree. I imagined roots sprouting from beneath my feet. Those roots stretched deep, very deep, and widely, boundlessly wide. Even if the ground shook, I would not be shaken because my roots reached to the opposite end of the shaking. Not only was I unshaken, but the shaking of the ground itself was due to the vibrations of my roots. I absorbed. The scattered vitality, nutrients spread throughout the ground, grains stored in the nests of termites, a single breath of an unknown insect that had fallen into winter sleep, I absorbed them. Like a waterfall flowing in reverse into me, the energy surged in, yet I did not store it, but let it flow toward one place, my left hand gripping the dagger. Now, I was a waterway. Immense energy passed through me towards the dagger I held. It exploded. Bang! The strike from the sword emperor that came from the sky was repelled by the strike that burst forth from the ground. The sword emperor spun around like a spring butterfly, rotating and lightly stepping on a blade of grass before stopping. That's right. The sword emperor grinned. You've learned to handle external energy. What are you doing? I exclaimed indignantly. The sword emperor, without losing his smile, said, "Well done." Ha! No, I mean, it's a bit embarrassing to be praised like that. I've only been practicing what you taught in the Golden Heaven world and the hints you openly gave on the 91st floor. No, that's not it. Why would you attack out of the blue? Knowing and using are different things. I thought maybe you wouldn't know how to apply it in a real situation since it's your undertaking. Oh, really? I scratched the back of my head. When I think about it, there were plenty of hints even before you told me. To manifest energy, the usual way is to accumulate internal energy. And the most commonly used method to accumulate that internal energy is to sit cross-legged in a place with good water and air and meditate. These are commonly known as qi circulation techniques, accumulation techniques, or internal power heart methods. In essence, the majority of the qi that martial artists use is originally absorbed from the outside. They digest and purify these and finally melt them into what is known as internal power. Turning the external qi into my own. This is the essence of internal power heart methods, and items like Millennium Ginseng, 1000-year Polygonum multiflorum, mystic stone oil, medicines made by an alchemist, and that giant turtle made almost entirely of aura, function as spiritual medicines because of this process. But the world and I are not disconnected. In the demonic faction, I am the rope that weaves the world together. In the righteous faction, I am separate from each thing in the world, but precisely because of this, I am also part of the ends of the world. Subjectification and objectification. The strengths and weaknesses of each are evident in the martial arts of each faction. It is often thought that the demonic faction easily ascends to a certain realm but struggles beyond that, while it is difficult for the righteous faction to reach a certain realm. Yet the number of masters who have surpassed the extremes is greater in the righteous faction. Therefore, there is no need to obsess over cultivating my internal power within me. As I said this, I withdrew the imagery of the roots that had spread beneath my feet. No matter how much I cultivate the internal power within me, even if I cultivate it to the point of complete transformation and rebirth, there is a limit to the vessel, that is, me. As the image of the roots was withdrawn, the pathway that had been absorbing the external qi closed. Rather, it is more efficient to make me into a single pathway. Naturally, the world's fierce qi that had been flowing through my body towards the dagger also scattered. Of course, to make the pathway sturdy, I need to become somewhat sturdy myself. I took a deep breath. The internal qi that had been drained out with the external energy was replenished by the true origin energy, like a vessel. That too is not a necessary condition. I looked at the Sword Emperor. That's exactly why, Master, was able to split a snowy mountain even without a single speck of internal power. That's right. The Sword Emperor nodded. There are two core structures in internal power heart methods: meditation and circulation. Whether it's 9 Yang Divine Art, Purple Dew Heart Method, or Valkenheim-style Mana Cultivation Method, the depth of immersive meditation and a pathway that carries the chi. These two elements are essential. Meditation is for absorbing external chi into myself. By deeply understanding the world, I break down the boundaries between myself and the world, allowing me to absorb energy from the entire world. Circulation is for guiding the chi absorbed this way to the dantian. As you just said, I increase my own chi by blending and melting it with the chi I had already possessed. Sword Emperor summoned a slice of the severed cloud and sat on it, raising a finger. However, if you truly understand this, if you can break down the barriers between the world and yourself in any situation by immersing in deep meditation, and if you can directly transport the world's chi to wherever you want, then your own internal energy is not needed. The Sword Emperor said calmly. That is the essence of the heart sword. This sequence of processes contained no grand ideologies, no abstract figurations, and no inscrutable mysteries. Once the premises are known, they naturally become logically possible. Such is the secret of all magic. Have you been here all along?
Yeah.
The Sword Emperor crossed his arms and laughed. My ghosts that were attached to you and the old man. I do control them, but this is even harder to explain than the heart sword. Please explain it anyway. Let me show you. With that, the Sword Emperor flicked his finger. Plus. Sword constellation, root. Rank, A+. Effect, you can create your living spirit to provide advice to those climbing the tower. Whisper your experiences of ascending to the 99th floor in their ears. Those who receive your advice will be astonished by your profound knowledge to the point of shrieking. However, the person must possess a corresponding skill to this one. Otherwise, no one will be able to perceive you. Synchronization between you and your living spirits occurs at specific intervals. Typically, this is daily, but depending on the tiers the advisee is climbing, it can be shorter or longer. The knowledge applied to your living spirits can be distorted or edited during the process of traversing the tower. This alternative guideline is determined by the pillar meeting. Plus. Indeed. I understood. Like a chat program where the message doesn't go directly to the other person but first passes through a server. The message you send through is also censored while passing through the tower as a server. Similar. What do you call it? Rather than a chat program. Is it closer to Puppeteer's Parade, which shares memories? No, rather than sharing memories. Yes. It's like pasting my memories to create them. Memories of avatars created that way are periodically synchronized and absorbed. Then updated again by pasting. But in that process, there's censorship by the tower, and since it doesn't happen in real time. It reminded me of when Sword Emperor's avatar looked puzzled right after being copied from the Sword Saint. Indeed, it must have been as absurd as waking up in another world. Even when I was getting thrashed by Fox.
Yeah.
Because there is a process of syncing at regular intervals, I realized something was odd quite early on. But with the time lag, and the double memory manipulation by Fox and the tower, it meant he had indirectly helped in that way. I was completely convinced. Well, then besides you and Sword Saint, there might be others you are attached to. Want to know? No. Honestly, I'm curious, but I won't ask. Because. I took out a new roll of duct tape and began rewrapping the worn-out handle due to the recent skirmish. The fact that you're here means I came in first anyway. Sword Emperor's smile deepened. That was sufficient as an answer, so I posed the next question. What's the quest on the 99th floor? What do you think? Not sure. I rubbed my chin. Looking around, the brilliant flower garden welcomed me as always. Despite both Sword Emperor and I having just drawn and used the external energy, the world's chi, from our recent skirmish, there was no change as if scooping a spoonful of water from the sea. It wasn't just because the external chi we used was being returned to the world. That much powerful world drew my gaze naturally back to Sword Emperor and it stopped there. I smiled. Shall we have a go and finish it? Sword Emperor smiled too. You've grown a lot, our little zombie. I'm in my growth phase. Aren't you actually more of an uncle than me now? Try calling me Gongja Ajusi. Zombie Ajushi. Given your childishness, I definitely seem more of an adult here. Ajushi. Shall we have a go? Oh, geez. By then, I had finished wrapping the duct tape around the dagger's handle. Tearing the tape with my teeth, I said. So, what is it? What is this 9th key that keeps someone like you nailed here on the 99th floor for over 100 years? Just as I said that, the quest window popped up. Plus. The 9th key. Do you remember the moment you first entered the tower? Plus. The Sword Emperor must have seen this quest window several times before. However, it was my first time seeing it. I read the following sentences. Plus. What was in your heart when you entered the tower? What was the first skill you acquired? What were you trying to prove? Plus. The Sword Emperor had his arms crossed. Plus. There is a man here. He said that everyone could become like him. Therefore, his last key must naturally be for someone to become like him. Plus. I was reading the quest window. Plus. There is a man here. He asked if he could become like someone else. Therefore, his final key must naturally be the someone he wants to become. Plus. The quest window was speaking. Plus. Thus, here and now. Finally, there are two men. Plus. I looked at the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor was looking at me. Plus. Your key is each other. Plus. In the next moment, the world resonated loudly. Chapter 397, Your World and Mine, 2. 2. Key formation complete. 99th floor is cleared. The flower bed split wide open. You are entering the 100th floor. From deep within the split flower bed, something surged up. It was a gigantic mirror. It was too large to reflect just a person. It was of a mythical size, capable of reflecting an entire army at once. The edges were rough with crystal formations, and both sides of the mirror were ominously dim with a purplish hue. Like a barrier from hell, the mirror stood between me and the Sword Emperor, and it had 9 keyholes. Please insert the keys. I lifted my head. Slowly, I walked up to the keyholes. Though a mirror typically cannot show what is beyond it, I somehow knew that the Sword Emperor on the other side was mimicking my actions. The first key, by those who breathe in the shadows you have cast. I looked into the first keyhole. Plus. What kind of person were you? Were you a strong person? A lovely person? A beautiful person? A pitiful person? Plus. I pulled out a key and inserted it into the first hole. I was someone people could rely on. From the other side, the Sword Emperor's voice could be heard. I was someone worth waiting for. The sounds of clinking echoed simultaneously. The brightness and saturation of the mirror increased. The now clearer purple mirror seemed to bring up the next question. Plus. The second key given by those who chose to follow you. What were apostles to you? Were they tools? Lovers? Family? Plus. I inserted the second key. My apostles were my equals. Similarly, the Sword Emperor's response came from the other side. My apostles were like my brothers. The mirror's brightness fluctuated once more. Plus. The third key given by the gods you faced. What were gods to you? Plus. They were beings capable of being negligent and make mistakes, thus naturally capable of evolving. The kind of people I would have become if I hadn't met my master. I inserted the fourth key, then the fifth in succession. Honestly, I did have some regrets. It was unfortunate. If I had been there, if I had stayed until the gray spider met her end, without climbing the tower. Maybe I could have done something more. I don't think so. As you once talked about the first wave, Gray lived as she wanted to live. The one who was my key on the 94th floor was the same in that sense. Those who do not blame others walk on their own feet, and naturally, they don't lean on others' shoulders. I was happy that stories about me had spread widely. And it was scary. There were people who assigned meanings to every aspect of my life that even I didn't know about. I'm not talking about malicious distortion. Nor am I talking about misunderstandings. It was a realization that what I thought was completely under control, in fact, wasn't. Becoming a myth goes beyond just being a topic of conversation. People don't fight about whether the nice uncle next door has hemorrhoids or athlete's foot. But if that uncle is bald, and the people talking like bald people, then it gets complicated. People fight as much for those they love and respect as for excluding those they hate and despise. And becoming the cause of a war is a pretty crappy thing. Clink, clink. The phrases that came to mind and the act of inserting the corresponding keys had become a question and answer session between me and the Sword Emperor, separated by the mirror. I realized I wasn't alone. Probably the Tower Master had been with me all this time. From the moment I entered the tower until now. And probably still watching. Hey old lady, are you watching? We'll be heading there soon. Well. Anyway, if you're watching like that, I did think you could have saved me sooner, like when I first met the Tower Master and heard about that ideology. But on second thought, if you consider the other timelines that Musha showed, getting an opportunity for one means depriving another of that chance. Even if that someone doesn't realize that it was a possibility they could have had, the one who turned back time can vaguely feel it. They can't help but doubt. Is this really the best? Was this truly the best path for everyone, from an eternal perspective? Zombie, can you hear it? The screams of countless victims created each time you rewound time. The sound of the footsteps of doom approaching you, from an Avenger who lost everything due to the butterfly effect caused by your actions that day. Doing everything is the same as doing nothing. The Tower Master chose to handle everything by doing nothing. On the other hand, I chose to take responsibility for all the changed causalities caused by my actions. If someone blames me for that, then it's a burden I must bear. That's too arrogant. I know what you're thinking, but... What about you, Sword Emperor? Would you regress if you could? Would regressing prevent regrets? Clink. No. Usually, it leads to even bigger regrets. You might resolve those regrets, but then even bigger ones soon block your path. It's a continuous cycle. And if you just live your life without regressing, won't that also cause issues? Clink. Indeed. Definitely.
Yeah.
Whether you regress or not, in the end, it's all the same. Clink. Even so, saying it's the same is a bit. To someone who can't run, a runner might seem like a person with a special ability. To those who can't travel through time, a regressor must seem like a monster. But in the end, they're all just people. The alchemist's words come to mind. But isn't that too arrogant? The alchemist was also someone who could hold their own in arrogance. Being able to do something means that you can also die because of it. People who can do things that others can't often suffer in ways ordinary people don't. In that sense, the world is fair. Clink. Sword Emperor Nim. Suppose you still think you could have saved your master? Even if you say, the first wave went where it wanted to go. Even if you fully accept that, don't you have to convince yourself again every morning when you wake up? Don't say no. I've been watching you as you fall asleep and as you wake up. You're right. I sighed. Before I knew it, the mirror had become almost transparent. No matter how transparent, a mirror cannot show what's beyond, so I couldn't see the Sword Emperor. I only saw my reflection in the mirror. Every morning when I wake up, I ponder. Every time I feel the wind is cold today. Every time I see peonies at the florist while walking down the street eating ice cream with Bambolina and Venomous Snake. I think about how great it would be if my master was still alive, and whether I could bring HRE back right now. I know. In the end, I decide not to do it. I think that's truly the best way to honor my master. But then, when I wake up again, I have the same thoughts. But the dead ultimately cannot hope for anything. Is leaving them dead really the best way to honor them? Isn't that just my own satisfaction? I know. If I revived my master, surely my master wouldn't forgive me. But isn't that really just a problem that ends with me suffering? Isn't that what I'm truly afraid of? If still alive, perhaps someday my master could become happy again. In front of my master's tombstone, in front of those red peonies, I carried the 9 worlds in my bow and thought about it continuously. It's paradoxical. Contradictory. It's truly ugly and pitiful. Perhaps these concerns will never leave me as long as I live. Rather, it will probably increase as the days go by. You mentioned it earlier, but now every morning when you wake up, you'll think about the gray spider again, won't you? Yes. Brat. I looked into the keyhole in the mirror. Only one hole was left. I quietly stared at that keyhole. That was when, with a bang, a blade burst forth from the keyhole. I recognized that blade. Far too large to be simply called a sword, it was the one used by the Sword Emperor. The enormous blade, reminiscent of a barracuda, twisted diagonally. The thinning mirror, as if sensing the atmosphere, cracked and shattered like sugar. Amidst the falling purple glass, there stood the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor pointed the tip of his sword at me and said, "As if to prove you're a coward, you're sitting there harboring such dark thoughts. You act indifferently, just like someone from the righteous faction. I'm just a bit too cool by nature. I'm so cool that when I see a pathetic loser wallowing in self-pity, I want to smash their head in, brother. Will you be able to? It's only now become possible." Despite the mirror shattering, the 9th keyhole remained in its place, as did the Sword Emperor's sword still inserted in it. The Sword Emperor, as radiant as the blooming flower bed, was smiling brightly. "Let's have a match." Is there a need for that? I don't really need it. It's you who needs it. You know. I was quite impressed by you from a rather early stage. Well, I do possess some damn impressive talent.
Yeah.
So exceptional that even bleach couldn't straighten out the creases. But despite being so wrinkled, there was something about you that truly amazed me. The Sword Emperor continued with a smile. You held a memorial for those children. 10th floor. The words he had spoken and the actions I had taken flashed before my eyes. That was an idea I hadn't thought of. And if you hadn't shown me, I would have never thought of it. Do you know what I felt when I saw that? What did you feel? Ah. Is this how my master felt when he looked at me? I tilted my head in confusion, but soon after, I lifted it in surprise. On the Sword Emperor's face was an expression familiar to me, yet one I could never have imagined on him. It was humiliating. This was the first time I knew this man could wear such an expression. The Sword Emperor smiled broadly once again, yet this smile still carried a lingering trace of resentment. But if you can do it, I guess I can do something similar. Sword Emperor Nim. I'm best at using a sword, so if I were to do it, it should be with a sword, shouldn't I? The Sword Emperor flicked his sword tip. Come. I'll give them their rights. Not knowing what else to say, I just blurted out. But you were supposed to be the ghost. I'm not anymore. And saying comforting things makes my skin crawl. What's wrong with a little goosebumps? Gongja, from now on, I will comfort you. Aak. Totally cringy. I warned you. Damn. The wind blew. Unknown flower petals scattered wildly. From there, beyond the shattered mirror, across from the 9th keyhole, the Sword Emperor was speaking. My nickname is Sword Emperor. A blade tempered at the bottom of the Great Yin Grotto, a disciple of the Sun Sage, inheritor of the righteous faction. Thus recognized as the greatest under heaven in the world of myriad swords. Sword Emperor. Origin, world of myriad swords. The greatest under heaven. Righteous faction. I request about. I remembered the expression I wore in the mirror before it shattered. It was a pathetic face that the Sword Emperor would want to smash. It wouldn't be the same now. Or maybe it could be worse. Honestly, I'm not sure. I tried to smile. It didn't work out. People want to cry not only when they are sad but also when they are happy. My alias is the sky that gathers screams. As one who will eventually oversee the afterlife of this tower, other nicknames include Screaming Sky, Moon of Ivantia, the White Lion of Lion World, and the guardian deity of the Azuras. The rightful young master of the demonic cult, inheriting the law of the heavenly demon. No. I corrected myself. I am the head of the demonic cult. Screaming Sky Demon. Origin, Lion World. The greatest under heaven. Demonic cult. Let the duel begin. Chapter 398, Your World and Mine, 3. The sun, bright in the sky, wavered once. The Sword Emperor moved. It was like a bolt from the blue, without any warning or precursor. Following the tilted trajectory of the sunlight, the sword flashed once, and immediately after, a missile-like white flash surged forth. 3 moves. I too raised my sword in response. My shadow spread over the flower bed like the debris I rode upon. Won't you concede 3 moves? The shadow flickered along the trajectory of the sword. Infernal Heaven's demonic sword. First form. Sword of Starvation, Heart. Shadows on the ground sank their teeth into the earth all at once. From the ground, energy was sucked out. It was more akin to harvesting than to cultivation, and closer to vampirism than to harvesting. It resembled a school of demons crashing a banquet, voraciously devouring the food without even breathing. I sucked in the energy of this world, as if possessed, and threw it straight up into the sky. The surged up shadow of blood, bang. It split the white flash dragged down by the Sword Emperor. Like peeling the skin off an apple, the Sword Emperor's energy was shaved away. The shavings of his energy fell like a sudden white downpour. It was as if a million fireworks had gone off at once, lighting up the world. I used that flash as a signal for counterattack. Infernal Heaven's demonic sword. 7th form. Sword of blunt impact, heart. In a world flickering between light and darkness, brightness and shadows mixed like a dance. Shadows that appeared spewed out crimson energy. With nowhere to escape and no pattern to predict, the Sword Emperor, smiling, faced the crimson tentacles. "You're really..." His bared teeth gleamed like those of a lion. Not giving me 3 moves either. The Sword Emperor's sword tip moved. TCH, a sound like clicking a tongue echoed. If that was the sound of a tongue clicking, surely the one who clicked it was the void itself. PSSH. The void opened. It seemed like a transparent giant was opening its lips to inhale. The world's fierce energy that I had fired through the shadows as a pathway was sucked into the crack in the world. It was sucked in. It burst out. Bang. Not from top to bottom, but from side to side, a waterfall of light poured down. The moment I saw the approaching cascade of light, I realized what had happened. The strong energy I shot. Before I could say that, it was swallowed and spat back. As if it were yours. Before he could finish speaking, I responded. Hup. I gripped the dagger. Lifted it. I planted both feet deeply into the ground.
Ha!
The shadow is the child of light. If there is something infinitely infinite as the light itself, it has to be the shadow. I anchored the shadow, now as distinct as the approaching flash, into the ground, into the world like an anchor. I secured my entire body. I stood my ground. Then, like a lightning rod struck by lightning, the wave of light struck at the tip of my dagger. Ugh! Suddenly, blood burst from my lips. The blood quickly dried up and disappeared. I felt the blood draining inside me, as if absorbent had been injected. If being struck by lightning during Constellation Killer's strike was like being instantly burned, this strike from the Sword Emperor felt like the blazing sun was shining right in front of my nose. Hup! I breathed. I took a deep breath. With my burning heart, I breathed in, and then... Hrya. I began to cultivate my energy. Infernal Heaven's demonic sword. 2nd form. Sword of thirst, heart. Like an old woman dying of thirst gulping seawater, I drank the light in with the burning thirst. I gathered the received light into my heart. With each thump of my heartbeat, I sent it towards my dantian and brain. My vision flashed. The light spread and burst through the veins and spine. My body trembled, the blood dried up, and the shock, I gritted my teeth and accepted it, and filled it with the light I had received. I burst it forth. SWO. As I screamed, beams of light extended from my whole body and burst out through the pores of my skin. The Sword Emperor flinched, raising his sword to block. He was quick enough, but it was too late. Like a hedgehog firing its quills all at once, the burst of light I expelled enveloped and struck past the Sword Emperor. Kook, the spread of the light was thin and wide, so the impact wasn't great, but it was enough to disrupt his posture, and that was sufficient. The void closed. The scent of incense being burned in a temple wafted. Thank you for burning away the impurity. Very, very grateful. As I spoke, sparks and smoke rose from my body. The Sword Emperor burst into hollow laughter. You crazy zombie bastard. You did it first. Who slurps like that? It's not like it's judging mine. It was originally mine anyway? Where's yours or mine when it comes to external energy? Here. The Sword Emperor said. Before I could say anything more, the Sword Emperor gripped his sword. Now you understand why I didn't yield 3 moves. Of course. Yes. I understood. It was inevitable. You have become even stronger than your master from that winter. Yes. The flowers of this world were fiercely and tenaciously clinging to life. Despite the strikes that split the sky and scorched the earth, the flowers remained there. Entrusting their bodies to the wind, they sang of their lives. Amidst the scattering of dandelion seeds, a man nodded. Are you happy? I was happy. Are you sad? I was sad. Both? I just felt a little like crying. In the swirling double helix of emotions, only the Sword Emperor's eyes were as clear as the midday sun. It's still too early to be immersed in either one. I took a breath, harshly erasing the moisture mingling deep in my nose. This. The Sword Emperor grips the hilt of the sword. This very thing. The sword tip moved. Needs to be faced first. And then. Martial blade. Formless form. Single strike. The world turned upside down. 4. He pulled the arm holding the sword back. Took a step forward. Tenses his shoulder. Make a thrust. As a conclusion, it was a single thrust. With that one move, the world turned upside down. From below to above? From above to below? From left to right? From right to left? No. The world turned inside out. Like sticking a hand inside a plush doll and turning it inside out, from the single point of explosion from the Sword Emperor's thrust, the world regurgitated the world. Spring came. Within spring, summer burst forth. Before summer could even reach the outer edges of the world, autumn exploded. From the core of autumn, winter came, and then spring again, summer, and once more autumn spewed out. A mandala of greenery, leaves, flowers, fruits, grains, fallen leaves, and bare branches stormed forth. I knew this strike. The sword technique, you against my master. Yes, the final, martial art that was unleashed. Now I see, it was such a technique. Do you just see it? It's not just that. Words spoken and unspoken. Still, a comprehensible conversation passed between me and the Sword Emperor.
Ah.
It wasn't slicing through space, but rather, time, countless layers of time accumulated, perhaps best described as spherical. I watched as that strike slowly approached. It was beautiful. It was impossible not to be overwhelmed. This is not just a simple heart sword. It wasn't just shooting out external energy. Your world. The sanctuary built by the Sword Emperor. His life. A vibrant field of flowers in full bloom unfolds. His life engulfed me. In the beginning, there was nothing else, the day of the sword, the moon of the sword, the hour of the sword, the minute of the sword, the second of the sword, the moment the gears interlocked perfectly. Oh. It has become. Finally, it was forged. The primordial sword. Like a dam that had burst, countless images flashed before my eyes. Our waiting, anguish, hunger, thirst. This world exists solely for you. Being. All other humans are mere illusions. I am alone. What so? Why is your face full of worries? Go. Full of. Half divine eye. Why is your face so full of worries? That which had occasionally emerged after glimpsing the life of the Tower Master, from this strike, was finally reading the Sword Emperor. You were born alone. Created. You were created. You wanted siblings. You felt loneliness. You did not want to be alone. You sought an opponent who could compete without holding back, someone who could pour their everything into, someone like that. Then you met a master. The master taught you that you weren't that special. In that satisfaction, he realized he wasn't alone. Sword Emperor, you are satisfied. I am satisfied. The Sword Emperor exclaimed loudly. I was a created life. A life given. I knew how to run before I could walk and received bows before I could even shake hands, a miserable life. Sword Emperor. But if the sun had a voice, it would sound like this. It was a fucking happy life. With a radiant voice, the Sword Emperor shouted. I affirm my life. All my encounters. Partings. Without reserve. Ah. Screaming sky. The Sword Emperor shouted in the pose of a thrust. How about you? Did you laugh? Did you love? Did you live? Were you happy? I know because I was there with you. The man who had climbed the tower with me smiled confidently. But not as much as I did. Sword Emperor. Accept my life. Feel it. Look up to it. I smiled. That. I gripped the dagger in reverse. The feel of the blue tape. Even though I just wrapped it a little while ago, it has frayed and burned again, making my palm damp with the tattered feeling. I see the sphere of mandala as the Sword Emperor's strike approaches. It draws me. Infernal Heaven's demonic sword. 9th form. Sword of Suicide, heart. The dagger, held transversely, neatly pierced my heart, avoiding the ribs. Blood flowed. Slower than a snail creeping along a window on a rainy day, the blood dripped down my wrist, soaked my sleeve, and then, drop, fell upon a flower at my feet. You. At the moment the Sword Emperor hesitated, the flower that drank my blood began to wither. You. I am. He realized he wasn't alone. I ran away to the tower. Kim Gongja. I had no parents. I respected the director, but back then, I was too young to truly think of him as my parent. I couldn't contact him. I couldn't ask for help. I thought of the Black Dragon Master. A strong and noble person. A formidable figure who is taking on both inside and outside the tower alone. But even for her, the reason she first set foot in the tower was that there was no longer a place for her outside. She said. I ran away into it. I thought of the Sword Saint. Those who entered the tower having achieved things outside, having abandoned what they already had, came in unburdened. There were those who entered to challenge. The Black Dragon Master was not one of them. Neither was I. I too had nowhere to be. Everywhere I went, it seemed I was an unwelcome guest. Among people laughing and chatting, where everyone hurried on their way to someplace they had to go or return to, it seemed only I was adrift. In a city overflowing with light, my city, groaning with sickness, seemed not to want me. That's why I came here. Fittingly, I had no parents. It was symbolic. Unlike you. If you were forged by the world, I was discarded by it. If you had everyone who shaped you as your parents, I was an orphan abandoned by mine. So. Just like you. We both left the world we grew up in behind and came here. Kim Gongja. Sword Emperor. Blood flowed. The slowly trickling blood drenched the ground at my feet. My blood, spreading along the shadows, withered everything it touched. It makes them rest. You weren't satisfied, were you? The Sword Emperor hesitated once more. I smiled, lips curling up while a knife was buried in my heart. I was satisfaction. He realized he was not alone. But you weren't satisfied, were you? Like I thought my master no longer desired life. He realized he was not alone. But just as I wavered every time I woke up, he realized he was not alone. In the end, you were the same. Satisfaction. You were satisfied with it, you weren't satisfied with it, you could be satisfied with it, you wanted to be satisfied with it. To you like that, Aha. For some reason, Bambolina crossed my mind. The blonde child who truly found this world, all people beautiful, the eternally youthful boy who walked around with a carefree bright smile, but even he wished for something more than that. Because he was human. Because he is human. Because everyone is merely human, and so are you, To you. I shout this towards you. I shall satisfy you. You smile at me like a beast. If you can, he said, try it. I will. I shouted in response. The garden of withered flowers unfolds. From my heart, I spread my shadow. The shadow with substance crashes like waves. My heart's whirlpool swallows the blazing sunlight. My sanctuary, a resting place for weary soul, encroaches into the Sword Emperor's garden of flowers.
Ha!
The Sword Emperor laughed. Like a dragon inhaling breath, he laughed loudly, very loudly. Aha! I laughed. Like a whisper, I laughed softly, very softly. Aha! Ahahahaha. Ahahahaha. The Sword Emperor's mandala of time unraveled. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, and spring again, all unfurl and spread. The raging torrent of time, flowing unchecked, folded its wings within the halted world. Just because you blocked it. The Sword Emperor stomped his foot. Doesn't mean it's over yet. I stomped my foot. With a clang, our swords, the dagger and the great sword, collided, making a sharp, eerily clear sound. Good. Yes, it's good. Ting. Good. Great.
Ah.
Yes, it's very exciting. Ting. Not bad, screaming sky. You too, primordial sword. Shadows overflowing from my heart were fired toward the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor, gathering light in one hand as if grabbing a dragon's neck, parries and slashes down. Ting! Barely lifting the dagger to block and deflect. And then I immediately spin around and strike down the dagger towards his neck. Even that is blocked, and I laugh. The Sword Emperor laughs. I am not alone. He laughs even louder. I am not special. He laughs sincerely, satisfied. I am. The Sword Emperor wields his broadsword. He swings it. Lightning strikes. I am ordinary. Yes, primordial sword. And I am. To you, I am. I am not lacking. I swing the dagger. Ting. 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 Clinging persistently like a wolf biting and tugging at the neck, not letting go of the Sword Emperor, who parries with his broadsword. I am not lacking. I was not born wrong. I now have a place to return. Yes. There is. Of course, there is. Like you. Like you. Ting. Our weapons clash. Our gazes meet. They part. So I am. We are. In a moment intertwined with light and shadow, and with a sound of ting, falling together. My dagger and his broadsword, crossed in the air, were stuck in the keyhole suspended in the void. Being alive is all right too. And the world shattered into pieces.